And welcome into this crossover edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and the Locked On New York Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and Locked On New York Rangers podcast your first listen of the day. For everyone on the New York Rangers feed, let me introduce myself. My name is Armando Velez. I'm from PantherParkway.com. You can follow me on Twitter at MonoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And very thankful to be bringing in the host of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast, Jon Chik. Jon, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, man. It was a really nice win for the Rangers heading into the break there, and it's always a pleasure teaming up for these special crossover episodes, Armando. This is kind of becoming a tradition because, if I'm not mistaken, I think we've done a post-game show for all three matchups now, have we not?
We have. We
Yeah.
have done it every single time, and this is the last one for the regular season, unfortunately for you and I. But as far as the Florida Panthers, I will admit I'm glad that they're not facing the New York Rangers for the rest of this regular season because they have had such a hard time with the Rangers this season, and I've spoken about it on the show before this matchup that, of course, the first matchup wasn't even close. It was a 4-3 final by New York, but it started off as 4-0. The second matchup, they were going into the third period down 2-1, and it took three unanswered goals by the Panthers. So both of those first three games, they didn't get to Shesterkin really until the third period, and one of them was too little too late in this one. This time around, they didn't even get to him at all in the third period. So this was a little bit of a different theme type of game compared to the first two.
I think so. I mean, really, it's been a very unique trilogy here. I feel like every game has been very unique from the other two, and tonight I got to admit, man, I thought the Rangers really kind of caught some breaks early in this game because, about 30 seconds into the game or whatever it was, Mika Zibanejad goes in on the rush. But let's be honest. I mean, the Rangers got a lucky bounce there off of Forsling and into the net. They catch another break a little bit later when the Panthers were offside by, like a matter of inches. And, they're down 2-1 early to midway through the second period. And I really didn't think the Rangers are playing all that great. The Panthers, I thought up to that point had the better of play. And I thought the Rangers really started to step on the gas after Lafreniere tied the game there. It seemed like the Rangers really picked up their game and got stronger as it progressed. But I think, early in the game, they caught some breaks. Later in the game, I think in some ways they made their own breaks. So I'll take it, man, because it was a really unique situation with, both of these teams heading into a 2-week break coming up now.
Yeah, and for the Florida Panthers, this is a second night of a back-to-back. And right before this game, Spencer Knight was just on a little bit of a 3-game tear, going 2 straight games of just giving up 1 goal in each game on the NHL level. And then when he was sent back down to AHL Charlotte against the Syracuse Crunch, he gives up only 1 goal as well. So bringing Spencer Knight back up originally on the taxi squad and then back to the active roster, it was a little bit of a let's see what this guy's got. And he was the goalie in the first matchup. Just for a reminder for the Florida Panthers feed and the New York Rangers feed, the very first matchup between these two teams, it was when Sergei Bobrovsky was going through a little bit of an injury that lasted him a whole week. So Spencer Knight was getting consecutive starts at 20 years old, and he hasn't had the best season, and but I was really excited to see what he had coming back after 3 straight games of giving up 1 goal. But the difference really in this game was the two goalies. When you think about the experience that Igor Shesterkin has versus what Spencer Knight has, and that I believe it was the third or fourth goal that Shesterkin had such great awareness of a line change by the Florida Panthers. He makes a he makes a pass to Artemi Panarin, and then Panarin has a stretch pass to catch the Florida Panthers on a change, and then having that awareness there for Igor Shesterkin is really that difference. And then the one of the goals that Spencer Knight gave up, I think it was to Lafreniere. The Spencer Knight was right behind the trapezoid, and then just a pass to Ekblad, and then the forecheck into the New York Rangers caused that game to really change. And the situational awareness that both goalies have, they're on different levels right now. But for the Florida Panthers perspective of things, I think this is a good learning experience for Spencer Knight.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's obviously a high-scoring opponent that he was going up against in the Rangers, and I gotta say, man, for Panther fans that might not get a chance to see Igor Shesterkin on any given night, first of all, it's kind of rare that he has a clear experience advantage against any goalie that he's going against. But obviously, Spencer Knight, I believe, is like 20 years old or whatever it might be. But that pass you saw him make on that play, where he got it up to Panarin, and then if I'm not mistaken, Panarin to Strome to Kreider with a tip-in goal. That's not a fluke for Igor Shesterkin. He's got a lot of strengths, and one of them is his ability to handle the puck and pass the puck up the ice and get some things going. And he looks to make that play. And I'm calling this right now, man. Igor Shesterkin will score a goal before it's all said and done. I mean, there's going to be a situation where there's an empty net and the Rangers are going to have a 2-goal lead, and he's just going to fire it down the rink, and he's going to put it right in the net. It might not happen this season, but he's got a long career ahead of him, so he'll get at least one.
And I spoke about this before previewing how New York has been just so fortunate with goalies throughout the last 20 some odd years. Of course, you have Henrik Lundqvist. His uniform is just retired just last week, and then Igor Shesterkin coming right into the mix and just having a Vezina caliber season for the New York Rangers. And a lot of national pundits, for whether it's The Athletic, whether it's even our network of Locked On NHL, a lot of people talk about the offense with the New York Rangers, especially 5-on-5. But the fact that you have a goalie in Shesterkin and then a great power play that the New York Rangers have, regardless of 5-on-5 numbers for this Rangers team, they could surprise a lot of people and make a run.
Yeah, I think it's possible. And it in addition to the power play, the penalty kill, which I think is probably even more important than the power play when it comes to playoff time. You can maybe get by with like an average power play in the playoffs, but I think you'd have to look long and hard before you found a recent Cup champion that had a really bad penalty kill, and that's an area where the Rangers really excel. So that's big. And like you said, Igor Shesterkin in net, he's kind of the ultimate X factor. I mean, to me, I know there's this narrative over the past couple of seasons where like, oh, well, you don't need an elite goalie. You just need like really good defense. And I don't agree with that. To me, the goalie in the playoffs will always be the X. You do agree with that?
I agree with you.
Okay. Fair enough. We were going to have an interesting debate there for sure. But yeah, man, I mean, the goalie that can make all the difference. I mean, look what Carey Price did for the Canadians last season, and look where they are now without him. So, I mean, that's just one example, but you get the idea. And yeah, he's a huge part of this team, and as he goes, they go. And I figure, Armando will continue breaking this down in just a second. But first, just want to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers and of Locked On Florida Panthers is brought to you by Built Bar. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. And there are so many flavors to choose from: coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie, and many, many more. In fact, Built is always coming out with new limited time flavors. So check out Built.com often to see what's new. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. And once again, we just want to thank everybody for making Locked On New York Rangers and Locked On Florida Panthers your first listen every day. And Armando, while we're on the subject, man, I've been doing this with all of the other Locked On hosts. Do you have a favorite Built Bar flavor?
I'd say cookies and cream. That's mine.
Solid, man. I'm going to go with coconut brownie, which I don't even think is one of the main flavors, but it's really good. It's kind of a new champion for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, man, turning our attention back to this game. I mean, we touched on the goalie situation a little bit, and you were asking me about Igor. The Panthers are in an interesting spot because, of course, Sergei Bobrovsky the big free agent signing a couple of years ago, and Spencer Knight, this kid that everybody's really high on. How do you see this kind of shaking out the rest of the way? And when it comes to the playoffs, do they have to pick one or the other, or can they kind of mix them in and out a little bit?
I think right now Bobrovsky's the guy. He's had a big turnaround season for this Florida Panthers team, and he did go of a little bit of a rough stretch towards in December, right before the shutdown, and I feel like he was hurt in a way as well. But that loss for the Florida Panthers was probably one of the best things to ever happen to them because number one, they were getting players healthy back from COVID and non-COVID because they were experiencing some injuries. Forsling was having a day-to-day injury. Barkov was out for a few weeks. He's missed about. It was a third of the season last time I said, but that was like a week ago. So now it's like more of like just over a quarter of the season as well. But the but Sergei Bobrovsky has just been incredible this season, and he's had a wonderful bounce back this season. But he's the veteran right now, so you got to go with the veteran when it comes to like most of the starts right now. And with no Olympics as well, he's still gonna get a majority of those starts because nobody's going over to Beijing for the Olympics, so he's still gonna get those opportunities, and he's still having a great season. He's not gonna win the Vezina Trophy, but you don't necessarily need Vezina Trophy Bob in right now as long as he shows those flashes here and there, and he's a top 10 goalie this year for in the NHL, and he's having such a bounce back season, and it helps that the Florida Panthers are scoring in bunches. They just had a record setting in January. Most goals in a month in the last 25 years belongs to this Florida Panthers team with 74 in the month of January, and it's helping. Though there are some issues on the back end in the blue line that they could definitely help with. The Florida Panthers are in talks with Arizona right now for Jacob Chikrin. They've been rumored as one of the teams to go after Ben Sherratt as well. And one of those players involved in a trade as well is Owen Tippett, who could have gotten a goal tonight if it weren't for that offside goal. But like you said in the first segment, an inch off that line from it, and that would have been his second straight game with a goal because he scored last night against Columbus. And I'm rooting for Owen Tippett. And Panther fans should be rooting for Owen Tippett, whether it's him scoring to increase his trade value or scoring to help this Florida Panthers team. And definitely he could benefit from a change of scenery. I mean, we saw that with Sam Bennett bringing him over here to Florida, and now Sam Reinhart as well being on a rebuilding Buffalo team. So just the complementary pieces around the Panthers are helping Sergei Bobrovsky as well. The scoring on one end tonight was just one of those rare nights that it didn't come to fruition. And I asked the question on Twitter that got a little bit of reactions, and I said this: the Florida Panthers can score in bunches against most teams in the NHL. What's going to happen when they go against Vezina caliber goalies in the playoffs? Vasilevsky's in the division. Jack Campbell is having a great season for the Toronto Maple Leafs. If the New York Rangers happen to be a wild card and happen to play the Florida Panthers, they've seen what they've had this season against Igor Shesterkin in 3 games and losing 2 of them. So it's a little bit of what's going to happen with this Florida Panthers team when the playoffs come, because they're not going to score 4 goals every single game in the postseason. And when you're really going to have to rely on the other end of the goaltending as well. What is Sergei Bobrovsky going to help you steal games when it comes to that? And it drew a little bit of reactions on Panthers Twitter, but it wasn't to overreact to one loss, because this has just been a dream season for the Florida Panthers. And just when it comes to that, it's just thinking out loud about it, and just when it comes to this team, it's just what are they going to do when it comes to that. And I also want to talk about even before that, when the Florida Panthers went up 2-1, the broadcast mentioned that there was a time where the Florida Panthers were leading in shots on goal, 18-7 against New York. The Florida Panthers ended this game only one more shot on goal than the New York Rangers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, how the Rangers were kind of a little bit, a half step slow early in the game, whatever you want to call it. Like I said, I thought the Panthers clearly had the better of play for the first period and a decent chunk of the second period as well before the Rangers kind of got it going with the Lafreniere goal there. But, it's interesting you mentioned that stat because in my last episode, I called attention to the fact that the Rangers are getting outshot like by a pretty good margin in just about all of their recent games. And I realized, listen, shot on goal, it's not like the end all be all. It's not like this perfect infallible stat. But when your team has been outshot in 10 out of the last 11 games that it's played, which is now the case for the Rangers, I think that makes your eyebrows go up at least a little bit. And they're just not getting a ton of shots on goal. And it seems like, especially early in games, like we saw tonight, they're just not getting the puck at the net. And, for a Ranger team, both these teams can score. And for a Ranger team that has so many guys that have such good shots, I mean, I think once in a while, you just got to let it rip, man. You just got to throw it at the net. I don't want to be that guy that just screams shoot the whole game, but every now and then you just got to shoot. And I think a great example of that is, this most recent game against the Kraken. Kraken tie the game at 2 with just over a minute left. And K'Andre Miller scores with, I think, 33 seconds left to give the Rangers the 3-2 win. But the Rangers on that play, they win an offensive zone draw. Mika back to K'Andre Miller. Now, if Miller tries to get cute and make this perfect pass, this game might go to overtime and the Rangers might lose. You know what? He's got a good shot. Let it fly. He took a rip. It went in. Rangers got the win in a game that they didn't really even play that well. So, yeah, I mean, again, it's a delicate balance and, sometimes quality over quantity. But for my part, I got to see the Rangers shoot the puck a little bit more often.
Yeah, and another stat that I wrote down for why those shots on goal, the shot on goal changed was the fact that the New York Rangers, the takeaways, 16-3 in favor of New York. The Florida Panthers were just giving the puck, and Rangers taking the puck away more often than the Florida Panthers were, and that really contributed to more rushes down the other end that was converting in goals. And Mika Zibanejad had just 2 beautiful passes. I believe both of them were to Chris Kreider that resulted in those 2 power play goals. And talk about not only those crisp passes by Mika Zibanejad, but also the season that Chris Kreider is having on his way possibly to winning the Rocket Richard.
Yeah, I mean, Mika and Kreider, they've had them on the same line for a pretty long time, couple of seasons now. And the chemistry is just very real, very palpable. You can tell the two of them are really close off the ice. And, the Rangers don't have a captain, but I think by and large, if you ask most of the players on that Ranger team, who's kind of leading the way, who's steering the ship, it certainly seems to be Kreider and Mika Zibanejad. They're kind of a tag team as far as, the leadership is concerned. And, Mika's just absolutely on fire lately. And it's not just with his offense. I mean, that obviously stands out. You can look up his stats and he's stuffing the score sheet every single night. He has become such a good defensive player and always has been, but he's gone to new levels with his defense, I think, recently. A huge part of the penalty kill. He had a couple of steals in this game tonight. Just the total package. And, when there were all these rumors about the Rangers, maybe trading for Jack Eichel, I'm like, dude, we got Mika Zibanejad right here. Just re-sign this guy. Why bring in a complete unknown who has a neck injury? Nothing against Jack Eichel. He's a great player, but this is our guy right here, Mika Zibanejad. Re-sign him long-term. So they did. Yeah, go ahead. What's up?
No, continue. I'm going to say something right after.
I got you, man. So, and then as for Kreider, I mean, listen, nobody could have seen this coming. He's somebody that throughout his career with the Rangers has been a very streaky player, for better or worse. And when they re-signed him, I was all for it. But I also kind of acknowledge that this is how it's going to be. This isn't going to change. This is how he's been for almost a decade now. He's hot, he's cold, he's hot, he's cold. And against all odds, a decade into the league, he's having a career season. And it's hard to put your finger on exactly why. I mean, he's become a tremendous net front presence, great at deflecting the puck into the net and also cleaning up some loose pucks in the crease there. But yeah, man, I can't fully explain what's going on with Chris Kreider, but I will definitely take it.
And you mentioned Zibanejad and those rumors to Buffalo, but what New York would have had to given up versus everyone else, because they're in the state, they're in the conference. I mean, they're not in the same division, but still, New York, the state of New York, that means something more when it comes to a trade like that. And of course, the trade is happening in Vegas now. You extend Mika Zibanejad, and he's a Ranger at least for the next 8 years. And the fact that Chris Kreider is having this great of a season, and of course now 17 power play goals. Something I talked about is that Chris Kreider on the power play is that dude you need to look after, and then he gets 2 more tonight. It's like, what can you do? What can you do about this guy when he's just having? You said it, a decade in the league, and now he's having his best season. I believe he's a first round pick, if I'm not mistaken, and
Yeah, he
um,
was.
and and now the New York Rangers are kind of seeing the fruits of that labor now with Chris Kreider being there. And this is with Capo Caco and Alexis Lafreniere not really exploding like fans expected them to be. Of course, Capo Caco didn't play in this one. Adam Fox didn't play in this one neither. But Alexis Lafreniere getting a goal in this one. How have you seen his development ever since drafting him number 1 overall last year?
Yeah, Lafreniere. I mean, I think at this point, he's what are we, a little bit past the halfway point here of his second season. I think it's fair to say he hasn't quite lived up to the hype thus far. But people have to keep in mind he is just 20 years old. It is just his second season. Last year there wasn't even a preseason or really much of a training camp or anything like that. It was, they kind of just threw him into the deep end, and it was, sink or swim kind of a deal. But he's getting there, and if you notice, that goal he scored tonight, for all his perceived shortcomings, that is his 10th goal of the season. So very possible that at the age of 20, he ends up having a 20-goal season for this New York Ranger team. I think he's somebody who also, and I've mentioned this on my show recently, I think he's a little bit better of a defensive player than he might get credit for as well. So yeah, has he been this instant phenom, that this unbelievable superstar player? No, but he's had his moments. And I also mentioned he's scored some kind of like Johnny on the spot kind of goals where he's just in the perfect position, gets a pass, gets a rebound. So that's encouraging for me too, just that he'll score a dirty goal every now and then, and he seems to have good hockey instincts and be in the right place at the right time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see how he develops more, especially now that Quentin Byfield in that same draft just got his first goal, and seeing how those two are going to definitely, hopefully, take this league uh, by storm. A little bit of for the Florida Panthers. I really liked some of their speed on how they were able to draw penalties. Carter Verhaeghe, especially, and of course, Anthony Duclair. There's superstars like Jonathan Huberdeau and Alexander Barkov make so many other players better around them. They haven't been on the same line for much of this season. It's just been recently where they've been back together with a few spots in the earlier in the season, but not something that's been consistent all year. But I saw on that goal by Anthony Duclair on the first one how those two superstars of Alexander Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau, 3 New York Rangers draw towards him to Igor's right, leaving Anthony Duclair wide open and then sniping it for a goal. And that speed factor that the Florida Panthers have, even though Igor Shesterkin is having the season that they have, I believe when you continue to outchance and outpossess the opposition, you're going to give your team a chance every single night. And Sam Reinhart is a guy who only had 1 point in his first 6 games, and once again he's averaging a point per game now coming into this Olympic break. So another goal for Sam Reinhart after he scored a hat trick last night in Columbus, which was his 5th hat trick of his career. So a lot of encouraging signs for this Florida Panthers team, though they took an L tonight, but it's still not to overreact after one loss. I mean, 32-10-5. There's not much to complain when you're 32-10-5.
No, I totally agree. And I got to ask you about Huberdeau, man, because I mean, I think this guy might be in the running for some hardware at the end of the season, at least in the conversation. But did you want to let everybody know about Bet Online real quick, man? And then we'll jump into that.
Yeah, yeah, let's talk about Bet Online. And Bet Online has you covered this season for more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the playoffs, right to the big game in a couple of weeks. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live, real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. Bet online, where the game starts. And we're back here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and Locked On New York Rangers podcast. So I want to give you back the floor, Jon, about what you were talking about in the last segment right before we went to break.
Yeah, man. I mean, I just got to ask you about Jonathan Huberdeau because, I mean, I knew this guy was like an emerging star in this league, but I mean, you look at the numbers he's put up this season. I mean, he's got to at least be in the Hart Trophy conversation, does he not? I mean, I know the Panthers have a lot of great players, and sometimes that can work against a player going for an MVP. But man, I mean, 64 points in 47 games. I mean, what are you seeing from this guy this year? Because he's been unbelievable.
It's funny because the NHL just announced their stars of the month for the month of January, and Jonathan Huberdeau got first star of the month, getting 25 points in 15 games. This season, Jonathan Huberdeau averages not only more than a point a game, he averages an assist per game. So it's just incredible. I'm pulling up the numbers right now. 17 goals, 47 assists, total of 64 points in 47 games. So every game you could at least count on Huberdeau to at least get one assist, and maybe he'll sprinkle in a goal here and there. And of course, I've talked about a little bit of how he's added penalty killing to his game this season, and that is a consideration for Jonathan Huberdeau to be in the Hart conversation. And he's definitely at least top one or two, and of course up there with Alexander Ovechkin, Draisaitl, McDavid. McDavid and Draisaitl do have their games in hand as far as the Art Ross race right now. And they're going to be making up their games. We'll be looking at I'll definitely be looking at Oilers games in the next few weeks as they'll be making up their games. But I was looking on the page Puck Empire on Instagram, and they released each week they release their leaders for certain awards. Of course, Norris, Hart, Vezina, you name it. And this week, number one on their list for the Hart Trophy was Jonathan Huberdeau, and that brought me a little bit of that brought a little bit of a smile to my face that someone is from the Panthers in a small market in a small town like Sunrise, Florida, that he's getting the recognition that he deserves. And also, I want to give also a special shout out to Anton Lundell as well for getting Rookie of the Month as well for the Florida Panthers as well, averaging a point per game in the last month as well, playing a bottom six role as well, and doing it at 20 years old, the same age as Alexis Lafreniere in the same draft, 11 picks after Lafreniere, and just the development of these players, of what the coaching staff is doing, the scouting department, the way they've been drafting. Even though Huberdeau was drafted under a different regime than what they have now, what they've been able to build to this in the season is just incredible. And Huberdeau's done it with being on the second line. He's done it being on the first line. He's done it doing on the power play. He's done it in different parts of the game. And he's and I follow Huberdeau on Instagram, and he, during this offseason, every single time that he posted on his story, it would be like him like working out and putting in that extra work of just him trying to bulk up. And you see the difference of like him bulking up. And he's up for a contract extension as early as July 1st, 2022. With this offseason, he'll have 1 year remaining on his current deal at around 5.5. I believe it's 5.3 on the without looking at cap friendly, but he's gonna get a payday, and it looks like, I believe it's gonna be the same exact cap hit as like what Barkov got in his recent extension.
Yeah, and I mean, with Huberdeau, as far as the Hart Trophy is concerned, I mean, I'd be cool seeing that. I think it's kind of interesting to see somebody, I don't want to say come out of nowhere, but a little bit of an upset. McDavid and Ovechkin and Draisaitl, been there, done that. Let's see somebody new win the award. I think that would be a lot of fun. But as for this game tonight, there was something else I wanted to ask you about. This game heated up a little bit, kind of like in the second period and certainly in the third period. You had Strome taking a hit from Marchment. A couple of the Rangers took exception to that. They thought it was after the whistle. Strome was down on the ice, and then they dropped the gloves in the third period. And I got to give the win by decision to my guy Strome on that one, man. But what was your take on everything going on between those two?
Yeah, I saw Gerard Gallant not too happy about the blindside hit by Mason Marchment. I don't know whether the arena was really loud and he didn't hear a whistle, and sometimes those happen.
Yeah,
Um, and of course, of Strom didn't see Marchment coming, and of course that was something that was brewing because that fight happened in the third period, and that was something that was brewing from the previous period. Of course, you take exception when you're not seeing something and then you're just hit from behind. So I get it when you're and of course the whiplash that could happen too when it comes to that, and you could severely really hurt somebody. And of course those are just hockey players being hockey players. Of course something brewing, you fight it out, and then the gnawing after, maybe there's some clarification there. And of course by the next game, I mean, they don't play for the rest of the regular season. By the time their next game, it wasn't what the New York Rangers went through with like Tom Wilson last year. It's
right.
not nowhere near that case. And of course, um, the New York Rangers, I got to give them credit for what they acquired this offseason, getting Ryan Reeves. They out hit the Florida Panthers in this one. I'm looking it up real quick. I know it was a big margin, 38-25. So they've brought a lot of physicality, even though the Florida Panthers do have a big hitter of their own in Radko Gudas, and of course Mason Marchment. Mason Marchment is a big hitting forward. The the New York Rangers definitely on the defensive end, both on their forwards and their blue line. I a lot of big physicality that really brings in an intimidation factor to the opposition.
Yeah, I mean, Reeves, his impact has definitely been felt. You've heard players on the Rangers kind of talk about how, they feel like, it's almost like a big brother kind of effect. Like this guy's going to watch out for them. What's interesting is Reeves has only been in 2 fights all season. He was joking that he has some trouble finding a dance partner these days. But if it needs to go down, he'll do it. That's what's really cool about that. And it's interesting. I want to ask you about this too, Armando, because on ESPN and mixed results as far as ESPN's hockey coverage so far. I think that's a nice way to put it. But they were talking about how they're not sure the Panthers can play like playoff style hockey, and I'm thinking like, I don't know. I mean, this seems like a pretty big team to me. It seems like there's a decent amount of physicality. I mean, what's your take on that? Is that something that they're lacking? Is that something that they could look to acquire come trade deadline season, bring in some toughness? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, they're gonna be adding to they're definitely gonna be adding to the blue line. Definitely in the trade deadline coming up in March 26th. I mean, crazy to think that it feels so far away, but it's gonna creep up on us before we know it.
Yeah.
And definitely it's with sometimes the lack of physicality, sometimes the lack of hits can sometimes result in goals on the other end. But then you have someone like Radko Gudas once again and Mason Marchment who just know how to lay the lumber, and you have one on the defensive end and the forward lines as well. But Mackenzie Weegar is another player who is top 3 in the league in takeaways as well. And Anton Lundell is up there in takeaways as well. So it's not just all about laying the lumber all the time, but it's just about what the defensive forwards of Lundell and Weegar can do in taking away the puck and creating chances on the other end. The broadcast actually brought out a stat as well. I'm trying to find in third period goals, and Florida and New York are both second and fourth in third period goals, and that has a matter to do with physicality. It comes down to clogging the slot. It comes down to knowing when to make hits near the boards as well, and when to. So it's not too much of a concern for me, but it's definitely something that they're going to be adding, and it's something to definitely look forward to for what they do near the deadline.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty wild trade deadline season because, I mean, if you look at the Eastern Conference right now, and I wanted to ask you about this, I've got my standings board over here, so I'm just going to look at it real quick. Yeah, I mean, it's like the top 8 teams have like a lot of separation between the bottom 8 teams. So I'm almost wondering if maybe this becomes a little bit of a buyer's market, just because if you're a contending team right now, it feels like there's a lot of different places you can look and be like, okay, well, this team's out of it, that team's out of it, that team's out of it. You can basically go on a shopping spree if you need to. Any thoughts on the way the Eastern Conference looks right now?
Like you said, I think the teams are solidified mostly. It's just a matter of
Yeah.
placement and seeding. But with the flat cap, it makes it a little. It makes me hard to believe that teams are going to go wild when it comes to acquiring players. And of course, there a lot of Florida Panther fans want Jacob Chikrin, and I understand that they do. He's gonna put Jacob Chikrin on this team. He's gonna the stardom that is already there with him is gonna shine even more on this team. But and the term is very the cap hit specifically is very friendly. But the thing is term for Jacob Chikrin and how they're gonna fit under the cap for the Florida Panthers, at least from covering this team is the majority of Keith Yandel's buyout is next year, and it's going to be a little difficult to put everything in. You're going to have to like wheel and deal a few deals of the current players on the roster who aren't expiring contracts next year in order to fit everything. And of course, the Florida Panthers, if they do bring in Jacob Chikrin, they're still going to have to pay Jonathan Huberdeau. They're still going to have to pay Mackenzie Weegar. The way Mason Marchment is playing, averaging a point per game this season, they're going to have to try to find a way to pay him as well. He's looking to as somebody who is worth paying right now. And so that's going to be that's the situation that you bring in if you were to trade for Jacob Chikrin. But the talent seems worth it in my opinion. It's just a matter is if you make the trade, you deal with the other stuff later. And I think that's what they would do if they're able to pull that off.
It's interesting that you're mentioning Jacob Chikrin. I mean, first of all, I think he's been connected to just about every team in hockey as far as where he might end up being traded to. But the Rangers are one of those teams, and they're in a little bit of a different situation than the Panthers. I think the biggest target for the Rangers should be a right winger. I mean, if you look at the way they lined up tonight, there's just not a whole lot there. And I realize Capo Caco's out of the lineup. But like with Chikrin, and you kind of touch on this too, Armando, but, you know, he's a good player, but he is under contract for another 3 years after this year at $4.5 million per season, I want to say, which isn't a crazy amount, but, you know, it's kind of a similar situation with the Rangers. They have a lot of young players who are eventually going to have to get paid. And with the Rangers, you know, they have some already established defensemen along with some young defensemen that they're really high on and would seem to have a lot of upside. So from my perspective, I just don't know that Jacob Chikrin is really worth it. That doesn't even factor in whatever you might have to give up to get him. I don't know. It just it doesn't seem like a move that's 100% necessary to me. Whereas going out and finding a right winger seems completely necessary. That's just kind of where I'm at when it comes to Chikrin.
Yeah, and the thing is, the Arizona Coyotes don't have to trade him right now. That's the thing. They have all the
Yeah.
leverage when it comes to his rights. So they can wait even until next offseason or even next trade deadline if they wanted to. So even if they don't make a deal for Jacob Chikrin, of course, they're sacrificing what they can get back from right now because of the term connected. But they can still get a pretty decent return even if they wait one more year to trade him.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, I figure we could pretty much end on that. You know, we covered the game. We talked some big picture stuff here and, you know, the standings and all that good stuff. But, yeah, man, I mean, hey, this is a ton of fun. I know the Rangers and Panthers don't play each other again this season, but if you ever want to do another one of these, I'm up for it, man. Just let me know.
Absolutely. Maybe during the Olympic break, who knows? And maybe if hopefully, I mean, I'm not hoping for this, but if for off-season content as well, and if both our teams are not in the Stanley Cup final, then we could break that down too. So, but I'm hoping that my team is playing there, and of course, I hope you're hoping that your team is there too. So, definitely,
Yeah,
man.
hopefully we get to break down the Eastern Conference Finals between these two squads first before we do anything else. So that'll be great.
You're absolutely right. So,
Yeah.
tell my listeners where they can find you and your show online and you on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, on Twitter, you can find me at jchick17. As far as the podcast itself, you can find that anywhere you get your podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, you can find the podcast. And the podcast Twitter handle is at LO_NY_Rangers. And how about you, Armando? Where can everybody find you and your show?
Find me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And they can follow the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts.
All right.
This was fun, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it, man. Have